Guys, I'm going to say something that I've never said my entire life. I've never held this view before, but it's the first time I'm gonna release this into the ether, okay? Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Never said this before in my life.
So stupid. Yeah.
Also, I don't think I've ever heard that in my life. Welcome to I'm Telling Mom, the podcast about three brothers catching up, playing games, and getting lost in the magical land of Equestria and loving it. Loving it. The magical land of Equestria. Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
That's fine. I'm Mason. Clace is hooking up with Applejack, helping her curb stomp apples out of a tree.
Oh.
Lannon's in an argument with Rainbow Dash, trying to decide what the best kind of weather is. And this is the episode about Bronies, about My Little Ponies. Friendship is magic.
Are those situations you just described, is Applejack the type of horsey to jump into a tree and do that? Is it like sly and Rainbow Dash is argumentative?
So, Applejack has the job of being a farmer and collecting apples and stuff. And Rainbow Dash controls the weather, I think. I'm not as knowledgeable, but yeah.
Can I? So
are there more?
I didn't know what you were talking about until you said Applejack, and this is gonna sound really bad, but the only reason I know that Applejack is a My Little Pony character is because the shooting that was in Indy, the FedEx shooter a couple months ago, declared his love for Applejack the horse pony or whatever on social media, and then went on the shooting spree in the name of Applejack. That's the only reason why I knew where this was going.
Which is bizarre to me because I can't stand Applejack. Like the little bit of My Little Pony that I've seen, she's got the southern drawl and she's gonna go get them apples, and I just hate it.
Okay,
we're gonna get back into My Little Pony. Mason, I had no idea what you're talking about.
That's fine. We're gonna all learn together during this episode.
I think before we do that, we need to address what happened last episode.
Last week.
Oh yeah, we should talk about it.
We should just put it in the open that, you know what? We're not proud of it necessarily. It's not.
Which is funny to me because I thought you two were fine, but I wasn't proud of myself in that recording. I was aggressive.
You were definitely
and obnoxious
over the top compared to us. Yeah,
so I do apologize to you both for that first off, and then I apologize to any of the listeners of last episode. It was a little too much.
I think that we haven't officially talked about it much, but I think that the consensus is that category is no longer on the wheel.
It's dead.
If it happens organically.
Yeah, we are no longer making it a game to get drunk on
We did it. We did it 3 times. Everything that's great comes in 3s, and sometimes you just need to expire other.
All right, so drunk episode aside, that's behind us now, and hopefully not in front of us.
We'll stay
ever
there.
Again. But so today, do you guys know absolutely nothing about Bronies, right? Like next to nothing.
Aside from the FedEx shooter, which is awful. So I really don't want to premise my whole idea of the community behind it.
I forgot that whole thing happened, to be honest. But so this Landon, I took inspiration from your furry episode, and I wanted to find somebody in the community, and turns out that I fucking knew this. My roommate in college was a Brony. And I remember when I found out about that, it was really surprising to me because he was a completely normal, never would have guessed it, like not over the top or anything. But he was like pretty deep in the fandom. So I thought it would be really cool to get an interview with him. And so I did. and I got a video of it. Pretty in-depth interview, so we're gonna go watch that exactly like what we did with the furry interview, and then afterwards we can discuss.
Landon, what are your current perceptions of Bronies?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think about Bronies right now? Even in a generalized state, it's okay, and then we'll do the same thing at the end and see how it's changed.
Obviously, we have an idea of like who they are. They're just fans of the show, but my opinion, just like good, bad, or whatever. I think it's weird. So that's, but that's the extent of it. I'm not, fresh slate like last time.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. I'm not judgy. My preference is to not be a part of that, and I agree. I think it's different that a bunch of grown men are leaning into a children's show that caters to young girls. So I also think that's really weird. But I'm really interested to understand like what their dynamic intake of that, and why that is.
Yeah, sure. So we're going to cut to that interview for our audio listeners and video watchers and us. Don't know why I specified all the people. But we're going to go do that, and then we'll come back after the interview. We should probably start off by what does it mean to be a brony? Like, what are the minimum requirements, and how insane can it get?
Okay, well, that's an interesting way. I guess I never thought about it before. So, when this whole first thing started, this whole like brony craze or whatever, it started with a very specific generation of the My Little Pony franchise, specifically the one centered around the show My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. And I guess what it was is if you liked that show, you were called a brony. Like that was just it. That was like the bare minimum. Like if you watched the show and you wanted something to call yourself as a fan of that show, you were a brony. Like I got there's a lot of stuff that people like when they're part of a fandom, like they have a fandom name, right? Like that's what it was. It was brony, right?
So it's kind of like a choice of, hey, I like this show and I like what it stands for, so I'm a brony now. Like basically the only requirement is I watch the show and enjoy it. Okay. But I mean the reason people are so interested in bronies in the first place is just out of curiosity, how extreme can that be taken? Like so you have at the minimum level, you have somebody that just watches the show. And they're like, I like the show. Sure, I'm a brony. And then on the other side, who do we have over there?
Well, on the other side, I guess you'd have, I guess any sort of fandom would have that that sect of them that goes all out. Like they're collecting every single bit of merchandise. They're getting tattoos of characters on their body. They're going to meetups and stuff. But although the meetup, I feel like that's more of a middle ground sort of thing. Like there were conventions and stuff you could go to, or there were parts of other conventions that were catered towards people that liked the show. I guess it would just be like those that, like anything, those that obsess with it to a degree that it starts becoming detrimental to their everyday life. Like if it's ponies all the time, like I guess that would be the most extreme, right?
So like it becomes part of your identity.
Yeah, basically like everything has to connect to this thing that you like. Like, but I feel like that's the same for any sort of fan.
Right. Yeah. Where would you put yourself on that scale?
So back in the day when I really liked it, I would say I was in probably a bit more of the middle ground. Like I would consume just the show itself, and then I would go to like the subreddit that was formed based on the show, and like I'd make some discussion or discussion posts and like talk about the latest episode and like my thoughts about it, or like look at memes about it, or I would engage in fan content from it. Like at the time there was this which I guess I should say like circa 2012 2013, there's like this huge explosion of fan content that was inspired by the show, be it fan animations or fan music, songs written about the characters or about different concepts of the show, or remixes of songs that were in the show, um, that sort of stuff. And I did go to a convention once. I went to BronyCon in Baltimore, Maryland. Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
I guess like on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say like maybe a 5 or a 6. Like 6 definitely in my highlight high time on it, but then once college started gearing up, it sort of got in the way of me being able to watch episodes every week, and then it just sort of lost interest. Now I look back at it and like, oh yeah, that was a thing that happened, and I do still have some merch that I have like up on shelving or stuff like that. And every now and then I'll think maybe I'll go back and rewatch an episode or two. And I'll do that because I think it's all on Netflix or whatever, and I'll just watch a few episodes while I'm working on something or playing a video game just as background noise. But
Gotcha.
you know,
because yeah, when I first hit you up, one of the things you mentioned is that you're actually not really, you're not as much of a brony now. Would you consider yourself a brony still?
right now? No. Oh god,
Okay.
no. Yeah,
But you're
no. I when how I take an approach to consuming media now is I don't necessarily, that this is more of my choice, is that I don't say like, yes, I am this. I'm like, I say I like this.
Okay,
So
and I think that's the defining moment
that,
there.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't say that I am a brony.
Gotcha.
Now, I would say that I there was that one point where I said that I was one because that's what you call yourself. But as I grew older and as I began branching out and consuming other forms of media, I just reached a point where I would like, you know what, I like this, but I don't have to define myself by it.
So. Is there like a reason that you left, or did it just kind of like fade out?
I guess it was just like, I don't really know. I guess it just got to a point where it was starting to get hard to keep up with the media that was coming out of it, and there was definitely a downward trajectory in terms of like fan content and stuff, which was some of the stuff that I would consume when I'm not watching that, and when it just became like started becoming almost a chore to try to seek out that content or anything like that. I just found other things that I liked. Other shows were coming out, other animated cartoons and shows and stuff like that that I would consume with my friends. So
and
that's just sort of what happened.
This is I'm gonna make similarities to the furry community just because we did that episode a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and that's totally warranted. There is a huge amount of overlap, like,
right,
between the two of them.
Well, specifically what stands out to me is it's really interesting that a big part of both communities, something we learned about the furry community, is the art and the media that comes out of it is part of the reason of why it is the way it is. Is it kind of like the same with Bronies? Like, if you just had the show and didn't have any extra content, do you think it would have been as big as it was or is?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's interesting to think about that. Some of the, because after you approached me and you were like, hey, I want to do that, and I started thinking about it more. I'm like, looking back on it, and the show itself, while it did have special moments, there wasn't a lot of it that kept me engaged outside of a few certain special episodes. So like how it was structured basically was they'd have like a big 2-part to open the season, and then they'd close it off with another 2-parter, and but in between was sort of like a bunch of there was no serialization, right? So there wasn't an overarching story between those two, so each episode, which helped the show in like re-airing things, and it was a typical structure for that sort of cartoon, right? But like looking back at it, I can only think of maybe like a handful of episodes that I actually cared about or actually was like, that was a good episode, just because of, like the writing and the pacing and stuff like that. So in between like that season start and then the season finale, like I would catch episodes, but the thing that kept me coming back was like people's reactions to like those big moments in it, or the content that came out of them, or if there was like a song that I thought was catchy that happened in a certain episode, like I would listen to that song and stuff like that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What's the deal with the show? Like what's the show basically about?
Okay. Well, the show, I guess I could give like a rough synopsis. The main idea of the show was there is a magical world called Equestria. And in it, there are different races of ponies. There are Pegasi, unicorns, and just regular horses called Earth ponies. But yeah.
To be an Earth pony.
Yeah. That's yeah, kind of dangerous subject, but it was the main focus of the show was centered around a character, Twilight Sparkle, and her group of friends, and how they would interact with each other and with the other people in this world, and they would learn messages of friendship that Twilight would then report back to her teacher, who was like the ruler of Equestria, Princess Celestia.
Okay. I did watch an episode, I think in college, I was just curious.
Mm-hmm.
I am always down to give everything a chance. And
Right.
I watched it, and it was very friendship centered and just a very wholesome show. And it wasn't for me just because it was too happy for me.
Yeah.
And I like a little evil in my life. We live together.
Yeah.
You get it.
Yeah, I get it.
But so one of the questions I have is why My Little Pony, and why it's such a huge community to the point where they have the label of a brony. Why is My Little Pony special compared to any other like feel good show? Like there's so many out there.
Right. I think what you got to remember, again, it was only this specific generation. Now, I think they actually just started another one that I think is on Netflix. It's like CGI and dealing with a different cast and different storylines.
So is it like Scooby-Doo, where they just keep redoing the animation?
Yes. Yeah, it's a franchise, right? Owned by Hasbro. And so once they'll pick with something, and if it sticks around long enough, because if it's owned by Hasbro and it's a show based on it, all it is doing is a 30-minute commercial for a toy line that airs every week.
I didn't know it was by Hasbro. That's actually
yeah.
That explains a lot.
But I think it was honestly just a product of its time. Like it just came like at the right point, where it was different enough from the stereotypical like what everyone knew what My Little Pony was at the time, to be something just a little bit different enough that it gathered a bit of attention, and then once something gathered attention, it sort of just snowballed from there.
Okay.
So,
and I think that again goes into, even if it's not the best show in the universe, the fact that people are able to make so much content of their own based off of it is really what draws people in.
Exactly.
Okay. My Little Pony is obviously a show geared towards little girls.
Yes.
So let's just come out and say that. No offense to any bronies out there. Why we keep kind of like touching on it, but do you think there's a reason in particular why bronies are mostly our age men or older? Is there a reason why that kind of latched on?
Again, I can't speak about what's happening currently with it. This is all from my experiences in the past. But I can talk about sort of what attracted me to the show if you want.
Yeah.
So, at the time when I first heard about it, I believe I was a junior I was just coming out of sophomore year of high school, going into my junior year. And my friend approached me and he was like, "Hey, there's this show. It's don't get me wrong. It's called It's My Little Pony." And I'm like, "What?" Like, okay, but it's like just watch the first 2 episodes, okay, and let me know what you think, because it's kind of like taking the internet by storm. And I'm like, okay. So I went and I found a torrent and I
As
watched the
you
first
do.
2 episodes. Yeah, as you do. I watched the first 2 episodes on my parents' absolutely like 450 kilobit um internet connection out in the middle of the boonies. And I watched it and it's it was interesting, right? And I started looking into it more, and I learned that this generation's showrunner, like the one that created all this, was Lauren Faust, who she's worked in animation a lot. Like she had a hand in. I mean, you can like look her up on IMDb or Wikipedia and stuff, but she was the driving force of a lot of shows that we would remember growing up as kids, like on like the OG Cartoon Network, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, interesting. And then I also learned that it was made in a program. It was either made in Adobe Flash or made in a program that was designed to be similar to Adobe Flash, which at that time I had just gotten out of a summer camp where I had learned Adobe Flash and started looking into animation and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, this is a tool that I just learned how to use as a freaking 15-year-old, 16-year-old, and it's like a professional show that's being made. That's kind of cool. So that was sort of like my draw into it, and I did like it more than I went into it skeptical and came out pleasantly surprised.
Okay.
Because the first 2 episodes of the series are introducing you, of course, to the cast of characters, and a rough synopsis would be, it is showing Twilight Sparkle is being sent on this mission by her teacher because Twilight Sparkle is trying to learn to be like the magical powerhouse of Equestria, right? Like she wants to learn all about magic, like that's her thing, and she wants to be like this great archmage or whatever. And Princess Celestia was like, okay, that's cool that you're learning all these magical spells and stuff, but your social life sucks. So I'm gonna banish you real quick to the small town, and I want you to make some friends. And she's like, I don't want to do this. But Twilight has like a ulterior motive because she's also studying some relics called the Elements of Harmony, which are sort of like the de facto magical weapon of that world. And she's like, oh, well, they're rumored to be in these ruins that are near this town, so I'm actually just gonna skedaddle over there and check it out. And like that's like the catalyst that starts everything out. So like I was kind of like brought in for this like pseudo like actual like magical world, right, that has actually like fantasy elements. Like they encounter like a manticore and a sea serpent and stuff like that, and there's this whole thing in the first 2 episodes about Celestia's sister, Princess Luna, having been corrupted by her jealousy and actually tried to bring it so that it was night eternal, but then her sister imprisoned her in the moon and all this other stuff. So there's this like there was a lot more like world and substance to it than I was totally expecting from anything with the My Little Pony connotations. So that's sort of what drew me into it, and what kept me coming back was every time they would have like more in-depth episodes or storylines where they would go about like what the world is, or they'd introduce like a superpowered magical bad guy. Like in the second season, they introduce Discord, which was a god of chaos, and all this other stuff. And that's what sort of kept me coming back, was that it was sort of like fantasy light. It was something that was approachable for no matter who you were. Like, and that's sort of what, after looking into it, what Lauren wanted from the show. She said that she wanted to make something that kids could enjoy, but for the parents that had to sit beside their kids and watch the show with them, they could also sort of tolerate it. And I think that's sort of what caused so many people to latch onto it. Was that it was much more approachable and a lot less brain dead than what people were expecting.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is if you were to give the exact same description that you gave of like the synopsis and just take out the cartoon ponies aspect,
yeah,
that's a show that most people would go, what is that called?
Yeah.
Like, where do I find this? So that makes a lot of sense actually. So is that something that I guess I'll ask your perspective on it. Is that something that you had to like get over the fact that it's like little cartoon ponies?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there was definitely, looking back, there were definitely moments where I'm just like, I can't believe I'm watching this. Like, I can't believe I'm watching. Like I mentioned some of the more episodes that I didn't quite jive with, when I'm just like, I don't really know why I'm watching this. I guess I'm just waiting for something to happen, or I'm watching it because I do like what the characters do in other episodes. I'm just like waiting for that moment. But yeah, there did get to a point where I was like, why? And like trying to like think of ways to justify why I would like something about pastel colored ponies, learning about friendship. And it just eventually just got to the point where like, who cares? And once I crossed that hurdle, that's actually affected how I look at a lot of media now and consume a lot of content. It's like, I like it, why should I have to make an excuse about it?
That's awesome though. That's really cool. I'm sure there are also people in the community, and it's hard to talk about this because you can really only talk about like your lens of this. But I wonder if there are people in the community that are older men that the draw was the cartoon ponies, and then they discovered like along with that, like, oh, this has a really good story at the same time.
Yeah, there's has always been adult fans of any sort of media that you can think of. Like, there's always the target demographic, but there's always going to be those outside of it. Like, I guess a good comparison would probably be Star Trek. Like, everyone thinks of Star Trek as like, you know, like the pencil pushing nerdy guy with the glasses and the acne, and you like live long and prosper. But I actually know a lot more like female fans of the show, like people that like it for that you wouldn't think like it. Like, they could go and they could recite entire episodes, like start to finish, like how much they'd enter long discussions about inter conflict between Spock and Captain Kirk. And it's just like that whole thing, right? Like, there's always going to be outliers, and to pretend that there's not is not really what you want.
Right. But also you did say that the creator of the show, even though it is geared towards little girls, like there's such a wider array of people that it's meant for than I realized, which kind of makes sense. Why a bunch of grown men latched onto it and found something that they really enjoy about it. Is there like taboos in the My Little Pony community that most of the normal people just really try to distance themselves from?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously there's stuff that, from my own perspective, I never tried to deal with, right? There's always been stuff that you would look at and you, I mean, for lack of a better term, cringe at. Like, I never really got the point of writing like works of fan fiction about the characters that existed in it. Like I never really saw the point in doing it like solely based on that. Or other stuff like hold on, I don't know how adult rated you want to
Oh no,
talk
yeah,
about.
we can get
Oh, okay.
complete.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
or those that would are sexually attracted to the characters.
Right. And I like anything else on the internet, I'm sure there's just an array of My Little Pony porn out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's oh god, man. It is like you can't even look up the characters with safe search on
Right.
because there's still stuff that filters through. Like there's this huge explosion of it, and part of it was because people are disgusting, but also there's probably some sort of mental connection between I like something, so therefore I have to want to it. Right, there's some sort of mental thing like that. That's something I never really got.
Yeah.
But
what's interesting to me though is again, when we interviewed the furry community, it was like the porn was a big part of it that wasn't even taboo. Like it was kind of accepted, but this being a children's show seems like it's really teetering the line there. Is that something that like the porn is like generally accepted, or is that something that most people are like, ooh?
That I guess it depends on what sort of circle you're in, right? Like when I engaged in it with my friends, it was always sort of something that was just outside of it. Like it was something that you would reference or something you would joke about. But except for those very few that that actually engaged in it, it wasn't exactly taboo. It was just something that existed. But we just didn't talk about. I guess that is taboo. Like the definition of taboo could be construed as that. So. But yeah, it was like
it's not really condemned,
but
it's not something
behind the curtain.
Gotcha.
And you can lift up the curtain a little bit and you can point at it, but not when guests are over. Please, for the love of God.
So basically what you're coming down to is that's not really like what the fandom is about. That's not what the community is about. It's just it is part of it, but okay.
Yeah, but of course it's the part that most people latched onto.
Right.
Like once you layer on not only is it as men not the target demographic, nor is the age group of men that were obsessed with it the target demographic, then you layer on this other sect that were getting off the porn of it. That's the thing that people are like, whoa, like everyone look at this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it and that's sort of what it's like. Well, no, I mean, if you actually just like watch the show or like listen to this fan song that someone made, it's actually kind of a banger. And like the slaps. People are like, oh cool, what's that from? And you're like, I don't know. It's a thing, I guess.
Just something I ran across on Spotify. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Just like, why did they reference hooves? I don't know. Don't talk about it. Okay, I'm gonna go. Bye.
Is there any way to really get basically like kicked out of the fandom? Like, is there any way to get excommunicated?
I don't know at this point. Because sort of like when I was in it, I guess like there wasn't really like a line people could cross really. There was definitely some things that would be like red flags, but at the time people were just so obsessed with it that anything bad would kind of get swept under the rug, which looking back, like I can definitely name a couple things that were like, that's not good, that wasn't good that happened. Like
what? Now I gotta know.
Okay, so I mentioned I went to a convention, right? To BronyCon. Well, they were having a concert, and during this concert, one of the fan content creators who had a pretty big name was on stage with one of the voice actors for a character, and the voice actor at the time was 16, and I'm
Mhm.
sitting there in the crowd and I hear someone behind me go, God, she's so hot. And I turn around and
Mm.
it's like someone that's like 5 years older than me. And at the time I was, I think, 18. I was like, and he was like, what? And I'm like, oh, yikes. I'm just gonna move away from you, buddy.
Yeah. So and that's one of the big concerns that people have is it feels like it's older creepy men that are pedophilically like
Mm-hmm.
into it for that. And
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine is that something that's really frowned down upon in the majority of the community?
At the time, I would say yes. Like there are again, this is all from like something that was like 5 years ago, right?
Mhm.
For me, something I was engaged in actively 5 years ago.
Right.
But yeah, there would be times where like, I was in before Discord, I was in a Skype group, with like 100 plus members, and some of those members were underage people, at the time, and like people would, like whenever someone would start getting like kind of creepy towards them, like people would be like, hey, yo, what the are you doing? Like, no, that they're a minor. Stop.
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah,
really good to know, and I hope that
yeah,
that's continued to be a thing, and
I would hope so too.
I would imagine it is, just
Uh
because
huh.
things have only gotten more and more PC.
Mm-hmm. And like I mentioned at that at that convention too, like there were children there, right? Like not only did parents come to the show, or parents enjoy the show with their kids and come to this convention, like there were people like just bringing like dragging their parents there who were like younger boys or younger girls and stuff like that. Like like uh mid teenagers, like 15, 16 year olds, like they were there, and like that's like their probably their first convention experience, right? And like you could tell who those people, because they would walk around and they'd be trying to like buy armfuls of fan art or like pins or plushies that people like hand stitched together, and like there would be their parents like, no, please, I just want to go home, please, I can't believe I'm here. But like younger people did exist and did identify as bronies or what have you.
Mhm.
And I know that there are a lot of people that sort of did make their mission to try to make this like approachable and more family friendly, and would went out of their way to do so. But again, there were also those that uh wouldn't think twice about some of the stuff they would say or some of the content that they would create, just because they didn't care who saw it, or they were catering to a very specific circle of that fan base.
Gotcha. Just you were talking about the conventions. I know that's a big part of the community is actually going out to the conventions, and that's the same with any community.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of things go on at the communities? You mentioned like I know music's a big thing in the show, so they probably have concerts and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. The BronyCon I went to, obviously there was like the whole like artists alley, right? Where you could go and you can people would have their stalls set up and they would be selling prints or posters. When I was there were people that were selling like custom jewelry that they made, like handmade plushies, like I mentioned. There was this one guy that was 3D printing little statues for people,
Which
and
5 years
like,
ago is
yeah, like the whole, like I go there and like their whole stall is this huge like mechanical thing. I'm like, what the heck is this? And there's just this little arm just dripping out plastic, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And they're like, oh, we're making a custom figure for this person. I'm just like, that's a thing, right? And they're like, yeah, this whole rig cost me like $9,000, and I'm making these things for $50 a pop. And I'm like, why? But I mean, if there's a demand for it, I guess. But there's always that, and of course there were panels that you could go to. I went to a few of them. Some of them were just for very specific groups that would make fan content. Like at the time there were like whole YouTube channels where they would make either like abridged versions of the episodes or would make fan animations and stuff like that, and I would go to some of those panels and learn about how their approach to that sort of stuff, like what they were looking for, how long it takes to edit out an episode or make an abridged version of it. talked to some. They had a Q&A session with voice actors from the show that showed up, and that was a huge thing. That whole place was packed, and then at the end of it, there was a concert where a bunch of fan content creators who made music were there, and they would play their songs. People would dance, and it was basically just a rave. We were told halfway through that we had to stop jumping because we were causing structural damage to the convention center. So they're like, no more hopping to the music, guys, please.
It sounds like the whole community is, for the most part, like, it sounds like everything's pretty wholesome, and it's especially like, I like the idea of the conventions because it sounds like it's a really good mix of just the content creators that are keeping the fandom alive and the behind the scenes of the actual show itself, and you can kind of pick and choose what you're interested in and go to.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And I think that's the same for all conventions. Granted, that's the only one I've ever went to. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they all have panels from content creators and stuff like that. And speaking of which, it's interesting about the content creators because nowadays I still see some of those names circling around.
Yeah.
But they're not tied to that fandom. Like, they've branched out, and like it's always fun to be like, oh hey, I remember you.
Yeah.
I remember actually seeing you in person. That's funny.
Because they're still super talented artists and have gotten even better.
Yeah,
but just
obviously.
Yeah.
Super talented artists. There are still people that do reviews of like different shows, whichever ones are coming out now. There's still those that are making music for whatever media has caught their attention now. That sort of thing. So yeah, content creators are always going to create no matter where their inspiration comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So just because at one point they were tied to that show doesn't mean they were always going to be. I mean, once I think
everybody moves
the
on. The
community started to shrink, they were probably jumped ship or diversified their portfolios and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. All right, so to end it out here, is there anything that you specifically want? Or let's even say back when you were in the fandom, is there anything specifically that you would want to tell people that aren't bronies about bronies, that somebody that would maybe give bronies a bad rep? Is there something that you would want to say to them?
Well, I feel like I've already said that a couple times through this, but it's just there comes a point where if you like something, you don't really have to justify why you like it.
Yeah.
And there's definitely things that you probably don't think you'd like that you would. So watch the first 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And see what you think.
Yeah. I really like that message of you don't have to justify the things you like. You also don't have to judge people and make fun of people based on the things that they like. So, yeah. All right. Well, this has been a really good interview, I think. On your half of it.
I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, I'll let you go back to your day or whatever. And we're about to discuss. I hope that I covered most everything that we're interested in. We're gonna go talk about.
I think you did a good job.
Thank you. Well, you know what? I'll find out right after this, from my brothers. So, all right. Thank you for the interview.
Yeah.
All right. So we are back. We just listened to the interview. What do you guys think? What thoughts do you have?
So last time, Clace immediately shouted out Dan, who I had interviewed for the furry. So I wanted to make sure that we immediately shouted out your former roommate, which I don't know that we ever got his name.
I think so. His name's Damien. I think we mentioned it at the beginning, but yeah. Okay.
Shout out to Damien because
Damien, thank you so much.
He too was totally all on board just to talk about this and very knowledgeable within the community, like about the community. So awesome interview.
It was good for me to understand that, like, from a brony, the other end, I was half expecting him to say, okay, the one end is I like the show, and the other end is sexual relations with the characters. But in his mind, as at least an ex-Brony, he's like, no, they're not even a part of the community. In the way that he defined Bronies was just very holistic to me. He didn't include, and he was very clear to actually like kind of to call them out and say that there's a small group of people, you know, that are sexually driven.
And I think it all comes down to like what, like maybe a big part of the community is that the sexual side of it, but it's not. It all depends on like where you're going to the community. There's sub communities of anything, and it kind of just comes down to what you're seeking out. So,
and a note that I wrote down, and actually I think he said it immediately afterwards, was that it's easy for us outside of the community to project the worst traits that we see from a group and say that must be all of them,
generalize,
right? So, and generalize them. Where his point was like, I came for the themes of the show, for the fantasy and the story writing, you know, and I thought that was a great point by you, Mason, by saying, if you just told me about this awesome new show that was about sorcery, magic, gods, you know, et cetera, I would be interested. I would want to watch that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, you know, it's those elements that are intriguing for us as an adult that like those fantasy shows. I love Game of Thrones, dragons, and...
Yeah, and it makes sense to me the way he worded it. Because from the sounds of it, is he was in it for like that fantasy story and all the craziness that happens, but like any other show like that, there's filler episodes where Applejack has to figure out how to get the apple down from the tree to make a pie for the whole town. And at that point, he's probably like, why am I watching this? This is ridiculous. I don't care. Where's the story? And that's kind of like for anything.
And that's, so the very last thing I wrote was, I don't think that the three of us can fully grasp where he's coming from. Until like, unless we watch the first two episodes. It sounds like this is a show where after 2 episodes you fully kind of understand the characters, and after that if you don't like it, you don't like it. So for us to have not ever seen the show, and we just know it's about ponies that are named Princess Sparkles and whatever, you know, it's easy for us to just say, why would I ever want to watch that?
But it made sense. It made sense that he kind of justified and explained that, like, okay, the writer, and I'm forgetting on her name, Lauren something.
Yeah.
Created the show. Yeah, like the target audience is for little girls, but they included humor and they included elements where it would be like tolerable for the parents as well. And it's not a super clean answer that I'm like, that's definitely the driver of these old men to this show. But at the same time, it's like, okay, I do understand that there are elements of this show that would appeal and cater to an older generation. Like I can wrap my head around that. Whereas before this interview, I wouldn't have even considered that.
Exactly.
Yeah, the fact that it's made to kind of incorporate older people makes sense that it would somehow create a community around it.
I think what's interesting is like, as much as I enjoy those same themes, like what you were saying, Mason, about fantasy and everything, as much as I enjoy that, I don't personally think I could get over the fact that it's ponies that are named Princess Sparkles, and like I don't think I personally could just overlook that at a certain point. But
I'm
again,
in the same boat.
I don't think we can fully grasp it unless we try it. So I'm kind of like, should I watch the first 2 episodes?
Well,
no, I was going to say we should, by the way.
Yeah.
All 3 of us should watch the first 2 episodes.
And report back next week.
Yeah. Well, it's cool because Damien said a few times that there's so much overlap with the Brony community and the furry community that we covered a couple weeks ago. And the cool thing about this is anybody can test out the entry level from the privacy of their own home without anyone knowing. Anybody can watch the first 2 episodes and be like, okay, I get it, or not. Whereas it's kind of harder to do that with the furry community.
Right. That's a good point.
But
and,
also
and
the extreme, it doesn't seem like the extreme for Bronies is nearly to the same extreme as furries. Like with furries, that becomes a part of your entire being. And with with Bronies, it seems like you're still just a fan.
Right. You're not
Right.
taking on a new character or immersing yourself in the equestrian world.
Or maybe you are, and we
you're
just didn't cover
yourself.
that, but...
Yeah, I don't know. The
Yeah.
two things, there was one thing that I found that I just, because Mason, you mentioned the furry community as well, I just wanted to draw this line. It's fascinating to me, and I think my hypothesis, we'll see a trend with the more of these niche community episodes that we do. Both communities have mentioned a high attention to content and that how that really brings these communities together. Artistry of some form is really a key stake in these communities.
Yeah, he made the statement. There was not enough special moments in the show to bring the community together alone.
Right.
It's really like you watch an episode and then you go to the subreddit or Facebook group or wherever, and that's where you really start to latch on as a community and become the Bronies.
Mason, when you kind of by the way, I thought it was hilarious, Mason, that you were trying to get him to get into. So you asked it was worded perfectly. It was your question on taboos. You just you kind of threw this out there, and I think you wanted him to openly address the sexual attraction that, or at least that taboo in this community without explicitly saying it. Again, I'm not sure. I don't think this was his intent, but he was kind of I would say, and it was kind of this unsure answer.
Yeah.
Whereas me, I would have been I guess I would have preferred him to take a more prominent stance one way or the other.
Yeah, I do think with that answer, he was just being a little more thoughtful, because I remember thinking the same thing. But what I really appreciate is his story about just online in the Skype group, when people start stepping out of line and be like, whoa, dude, she's underage. It sounds like they are protective.
I have a theory that he was a little hesitant on that, Clace, because he made the point that it's shunned and it gets knocked down, and that's what should be happening. But I have a theory, because you didn't really touch on how often that is, how common that is. Is this community a frequent place for pedos, basically? And I have a theory that it's maybe a little bit more substantial than these one instances that he referenced. That is really where a lot of the shame comes from of being a brony, because knowing that there's probably a lot more of that than we think. And I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think we don't know.
But also, I hope, and it's hard to say, because he wasn't really he wasn't into that side of it, so he didn't have as much insight on it. But I would hope that that's something that the Brony community acknowledges and are very hyper aware of. We need to protect people if they need protecting, because we know that this is a thing that can happen. And it sounds like the communities that Damien was a part of was like that. It's just there's so many different types of people in these fandoms.
It's an uncomfortable topic to talk about, just in general.
Right.
I think we all are absolutely burn them at the stake, but it's kind of hard to say that when you're put on the spot, and how do you politically kind of address the realities of pedophilia, especially if it's a part of a community that you identify with.
Oh yeah,
because then it's how do I even talk about this without making myself seem like I'm a part of that subgroup?
Yeah,
but
so we started off the episode with asking what your guys' opinions are on the community as a whole. So what are you guys, where are you standing now?
I stand with Damien, is how I'm going to phrase this.
Hashtag we stand with Damien.
Well, so his mentality and the way he was introduced to it and latched onto the show is purely from the animation style, the story elements, and I can totally get behind that. So of course, we're talking about this other side, this extreme side, and so that's where I want to be conscious of. I think most people are Damiens within the group, and I think that's awesome, and they have that right to do that.
So my assessment before was that it was just weird. I'm gonna still maintain that I think it's a little weird and different, but huge caveat. I'm completely, especially even more so now, more accepting of it. like I have a logical path. So before this interview, I had no really logical explanation of why this type of show would draw adult men in. But I think he very clearly articulated like how he got into it. Even I love the fact that he was like, I like it. Why do I have to justify it to you?
That was
and
my
I think
biggest takeaway.
That's such a true reality that like how dare we judge people for something as serious as like sexualizing little kids? Like how dare we like impose that on an entire group of people that just like a TV show?
Yeah.
And so I think that was a big key thing for me. Like, it's maybe not something I'm super into, which by the way, Damien, I'm going to watch the first 2 episodes. So I'm going to give it a shot.
I think we all are. We have to, I think.
But so I think it's cool. I stand with Damien. I think it's, as long as you're genuinely on the up and up with it, like,
yeah, it's cool to me that Clace, the biggest takeaway for me was I like what I like and I don't have to explain myself. And what's cool is it seems like that was a huge factor. Like My Little Pony for Damien was a huge thing that helped him discover I can do what I want. I can like what I want and I don't need to feel judged for it because this is my own personal enjoyment. Like, and that's
how
really
many people
cool.
are still struggling with that? Like,
so
as
like
adults?
that's an extreme thing to like that you feel like you have to hide, and just slowly becoming comfortable with it and realizing it doesn't matter what other people think is a really cool tool.
But on that exact note, I think it's okay for us to check out the first 2 episodes and know what we don't like, and to say like it's not my thing. Sorry, I think it's okay for us to watch it and then still say it's weird, but not impose that on Damien, because again, he likes what he likes. That's awesome, good for him.
It's the exact same. Honestly, it's the same thing of like, do you like this? I have a lot of friends that don't like chocolate. Like they don't like chocolate. I'm like, I cannot wrap my mind around how you will not enjoy this Hershey bar right now. Like I can't even understand it. But they're like, it's just bitter. It tastes bad to me. Like it's that type of thing. It's like, why are we so judgmental of other people when we just have preferential differences?
I want to challenge the 2 of you and me to watch this from a story aspect, from mainly just focusing on like what the content behind it is, and try to look past the cartoon.
I can't help but to do that with everything I watch. I'm always hyper analyzing that kind of stuff, so that's totally.
It's gonna be hard for me to get over, but I'm gonna do my best.
Can I give you a mini challenge, Mason? Say the word that I just texted you out loud.
Oh no. Come on.
Say it.
I picked up on this too.
I think I pronounced it taboo.
You totally said taboos.
I didn't say s, or if it was plural, but I say ta instead of ta. It should be taboo, but I was saying taboo.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted that to be thrown out. I got a little bit of flack on the last interview. Somebody's got to get a little flack.
That's fine.
Here.
I'll take it. I'll take it. All right. So we're wrapping up. Let's pull the wheel out. But before we do, we failed to do an important part of this episode, and we're gonna put it in right now. Thank you so much to our sponsor.
Our sponsor. Guys, today's sponsor is Can of Bread. It's bread in a can. It's literally just bread in a can. It's a real thing. You can look it up. It's real, you idiot. Go get it. So thank you to Can of Bread.
Thank you to Can of Bread. Is that Landon? Is that a real thing?
That's a real thing.
I've heard of that. Yeah, it's like a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's the end of yet another episode of I'm Telling Mom. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Discord, and of course, all podcasting platforms everywhere. Go pick yourself up some exclusive ITM merch at itmmerch.com. Can't find it anywhere else. We appreciate you listening to our nonsense and look forward to catching up with you next week when we discuss
DIY.
D-I-W-H-Y.
D-I-W-H-Y.
This is going to be fun. So this is going to be my episode next week.
This is Landon.
And we're going to do some hands-on experimental DIYs. So
That'll be
make sure you
fun.
listen.
Landon, you should send us a grocery list so we all have to do experiments together.
We will make it fun and interesting for sure.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And right before we end, how are my interview skills?
I thought that was great, Mason. I literally right off the bat, I loved the whole style of it, and I think you did a great job.
I give you a 7 out of 10.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, check us out next week for DIY. Thank you guys for listening to this episode.
Appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye.